In the autumn of 1888, in a few crowded streets in the East End of London, 5 women were murdered. In 10 weeks. You know the story. You almost certainly know the name. And nearly everything you know about it was invented by other people, after the fact. So let's do the version that's actually true. It's stranger. Start with the place. Whitechapel was about a square mile, holding tens of thousands of people. Lodging houses where you paid a few pennies to sleep sitting up on a rope. Streets with no lighting to speak of. Alleys that connected to other alleys that connected to courtyards, and a fog that came off the river and sat there. The police force patrolling it had been invented within living memory. A constable's kit was a lantern, a whistle, a wooden stick, and his own 2 feet. And into that, in 10 weeks, 5 women were killed. Mary Ann Nichols, Annie Chapman, Elizabeth Stride, Catherine Eddowes, Mary Jane Kelly. Remember those names? We'll come back to them, because almost nobody does. Now, the name. On the 25th of September, a letter arrived at a London news agency. It was written in red ink, it was gleeful, it taunted the police, and it was signed with 2 words that had never existed before: Jack the Ripper. The press printed it. And that was the moment a series of murders in a poor district became a character. A brand, really. He had a name, a voice, a personality, all of it delivered in a single letter. Here's the problem. Almost nobody now thinks the killer wrote it. A former chief inspector later named a journalist at that very agency as the author. Another journalist reportedly admitted, decades on, that he and a colleague had produced the letters themselves. And when a forensic linguist examined them, the conclusion was that at least 2 came from the same hand, and that hand probably wasn't the murderer's. Think about what that means. The most famous name in the history of crime was, in all likelihood, a piece of marketing, written by someone selling newspapers. Everything that came after, the top hat, the black bag, the gentleman monster stalking the fog, grew out of a name that a reporter may well have made up on a slow afternoon, which brings us to the part everyone gets wrong. The story says the killer was brilliant, that he outwitted Scotland Yard, that he was a surgeon or a nobleman or someone clever enough to vanish. The truth is much more boring and much more unsettling. They couldn't catch him because the tools to catch him did not exist yet. Consider what a detective in 1888 actually had. No fingerprinting. It wasn't part of British police work yet. No blood typing. No DNA, obviously. No way to match a weapon to a wound. No usable photograph of a suspect nobody had seen properly. Which left essentially 2 ways to convict a murderer. Catch him in the act, or get him to confess. That's it. That's the whole toolkit. So the police did what they could. They took statements, thousands of them. They went door to door through the lodging houses. They followed up on hundreds of suspects, and every case fell apart the same way. Either no evidence or a solid alibi. And there was one more problem, which is almost funny. The murders happened across a boundary line. 2 separate police forces were running 2 separate investigations with 2 sets of paperwork in an area you could walk across in 20 minutes. He wasn't uncatchable. He was just early, which hasn't stopped anybody from solving it, repeatedly. Over the years, the list of named suspects has grown past 100. A doctor, a painter, a prince, a children's author at one point. The pattern is always the same. Someone finds a man who was alive in 1888 and behaved oddly and works backwards. The most confident attempt came recently, and it's worth telling properly, because it shows how this goes. A shawl, said to have come from one of the crime scenes, was tested for DNA. The results were announced to the world. The killer was a Polish barber, a man who had actually been a suspect at the time. Case closed. Headlines everywhere. Then the geneticists read the paper. The mutation being used to tie the barber to the shawl had been described as vanishingly rare, roughly 1 in 300,000. It wasn't. A decimal point had been misplaced. The real figure is that over 99% of people of European descent carry it. It also turned out the test could only ever exclude a suspect, never identify one, and that the shawl itself had been handled barehanded by an unknown number of people for more than a century, with no solid evidence it was ever at a crime scene at all. So no, still not solved. And here's the thing I keep coming back to. The reason this case never dies isn't that it's mysterious. Plenty of murders go unsolved. It's that a nameless man got a brilliant name, and the name turned him into a story. He became a character in a top hat. He got films and tours and a museum. He became genuinely entertaining. And the 5 women became a category. The victims. A number in a headline. They were people. Mary Ann Nichols was 43 and had 5 children. Annie Chapman had lost a daughter and was seriously ill. Elizabeth Stride had come to London from Sweden. Catherine Eddowes had been released from a police cell an hour before she died. Mary Jane Kelly was 25, and the only one killed indoors, in a room she rented for a few shillings a week. We remember a name that a journalist probably invented. We forgot theirs.